Okay, hello. I am Sherry Strong from Children's Health Defence Canada. I'm the Alberta Provincial Director, in case you didn't know. And today I have a real treat for you, definitely a treat for me. I'm interviewing a dear friend, Olga Sheean, who is also a brilliant author. This is book nine, eight, or nine?
Number eight.
Number eight. Okay. I actually thought it was like 14. She's so
Feels like
proficient
that.
at producing books. And for someone who's just produced one print book, I'm like, she's like the Irish Catholic book producer, as opposed to the Protestant Sherry, who's produced no children or one child. She's produced eight children. Pop, pop, pop. Anyway, I've got a bit of reading to do before I let Olga talk, and just to give you an idea of how brilliant writer she is. I've read tons of bios and I've read tons of book, um, you know, synopses, and hers are brilliant. To just give you a background on her, oh, before I do, one of the mandates I had for 2023 with the interviews for Children's Health Defense is I wanted to stop talking about just the problem, and I wanted to interview people who also had solutions. And I can say of anyone that I've interviewed in 2023, what I do know is for what's ailing us in our world right now, Olga, and in her book, has some of the best solutions I I've ever come across. Uh, Robert David Steele, before he died, one of his last interviews was with Olga Sheean, and he'd interviewed many, many people. And after his interview, he actually said, "This is one of the most important interviews I've ever done." So just to give you kind of a reference of the knowledge that this woman has, and the humility on top of it is amazing. So when I met Olga, we were both in Vancouver, and as I knew her then, she was well established as a published author. In her past, she'd actually worked for WWF, that's not WEF, international in Switzerland. And she was an editor for UNAIDS, for the WHO, and other United Nations organizations in Geneva. She also was a holistic health magazine editor and columnist in Vancouver. And she's written over 300 articles on alternative health, personal growth, human potential, and the environment and conscious evolution, electromagnetic fields, and quantum physics. Just some light reading for all of you guys. You can find more of her books at olgasheean.com/books. We'll put that in the show notes. But some of the books she's written, The Parents, this was actually fiction, but it's also a futuristic thriller for enlightened solutions moving forward for our world, and very relevant to what we're experiencing today. EMF Off is probably a book that every person should read, and it's basically a call to consciousness in our misguidedly microwaved world. And Olga herself is EMF sensitive. I am as well, maybe not as much, but it's really, um, I'd say, essential reading for all of us who are in this digital age of phones, etc. And Fit for Love, she wrote about finding her perfect mate, which a lot of people who write these books don't actually have the perfect mate, but she does with her beautiful husband. And they have a beautiful relationship that I can attest to because I've been around them lots, and they're amazing people. And now, okay, can I mention that where you're living? Not specifically, but the kind of the
Yes, of course.
area. She's living in rural France. So I saw her on the map the other day. She was waving from her house. I did the satellite. And now that's a bit of a longer introduction than I normally do, uh, because I just wanted to kind of establish the person who's written this amazing book. So if you read the entire synopsis of the book, you'll know for sure that this is a book that every person needs to read along with EMF Off. Um, so one of the significant sentences is, this confronting, thought-provoking, action-inspiring book For those who are willing, for those who are willing to confront their negative conditioning, take responsibility for their lives, and recognize that a personal transformation is the key to global change. I think this is one of the things for all of us who are so alarmed with what's going on in the world. It's really hard to grasp, but absolutely essential. And we get bits of it, and then we kind of retract and go, "Oh, the world's terrible," and then we realize we got to be the change we wish to see in the world. This book challenges the conventional narratives about how the world works, proposing a unique rationale for global crisis and transformation. It's designed to profoundly change people's minds about who they are and what is possible in life, exposing the real virus, corrupting our human software, and the true agents of our downfall buried inside us all. It explores the essence of our humanness, providing a system for transforming negative programming, resolving dysfunction, and promoting an understanding of the root cause of all crises. It is designed to enable us to reclaim our innate wisdom, heal our psychoside, and embody healthy human dynamics while addressing the true drivers of dysfunction, conflict, and codependence. So, psychocide is the killing of our independent, critical, free-thinking minds, the distortion, perversion of the human soul, mind, and spirit. And it explains how crises, challenge, and conflicts provide all the practical clues we need for turning things around, once we understand what they represent and where they are pushing us to go. So I'm going to put the rest of what describes the book in the description. I don't want to take up the whole interview with reading that.
I think you hardly need me now.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's like, I'm
Maybe
doing.
we should just give the full title of the book. So it's actually Psychocide Reversal, Rebooting the Species. And that's the full title of the one that we're talking about now. So
Rebooting the species. And man, does this species need a reboot, Olga? So
yes.
Tell me about this book in relationship to all the other books that you've written and how you feel about what you've written.
Well, I suppose this would be the culmination of my 30 years of doing this work and doing it on myself all of that time as well, because I'm still very much a work in progress and, learning as I go. But it's about understanding what truly drives us and how we are programmed to behave and show up or not show up in certain ways, and how this determines what comes to us in life and actually what we attract and manifest in the collective as well. So you were pointing out earlier that I talked about crisis and conflict and all of these things being the clues to what's happening in our world and what we need to do about them. And really, crises are a call to empowerment. And when we see what's happening in the world with governments doing to us the things that they're doing, we tend to get very externally focused, reactive, defensive, protective. And we don't see, if we don't have an understanding of how we've been programmed generationally, we don't see that we have actually set the standard for how we're being treated. When we were programmed, or our ancestors were programmed a very long time ago, we were programmed with low self-acceptance, low self-worth. We were taught that we were unworthy, that we were sinful. This all came through religious indoctrination, in fact. But it affects everybody now, whether they're religious or not. And this separated us from our true selves. We lost connection with nature. We lost connection with our wisdom, with our spiritual autonomy. We were taught to defer to an external authority. We were told it was this sort of very judging, vengeful God that our ancestors had no need of. They were very earthy, sensual, egalitarian people. Our pagan ancestors lived very close to earth and to nature, and they understood it, and they communed with nature. So they were very wise and simple in a way. So we lost a lot of that kind of simple nature-based living, and we have sort of morphed into this progressively denatured way of living, having surrendered a lot of our self-responsibility, given up our choices to governments that we're now blaming for running things the way they are, and really kind of ruining things in the process, but not realizing the power of our programming, and therefore our emotions, our thoughts, our projections, our limitations, our fears, our self-doubts, our failure to show up, or, all of these things, not realizing that those determine quality and even quantity of life that we experience. And those things also very physically, ultimately manifest our reality. So what we're seeing on the outside, if we look at what's coming at us in terms of crises and conflicts, is a reflection of what we need to look at inside ourselves, to see how we have separated, how, I talk a lot in the book about conflict, which we see a lot of in our world. There's a lot of divisiveness coming from all the fear-mongering and intentional sort of further splitting us from ourselves and from each other, which is a great way, the divide and conquer approach, great way to sort of alienate people, but also weaken them. So we're being taught to do all of these things, or distracted by all of these things. And in fact, we're being taught, or led to fear the wrong things that really we should not fear at all. We were taught to be afraid of our bodies, that our bodies might suddenly erupt with some kind of deadly virus, or we should be afraid of other people who might affect us in some terrible way, when there are other more legitimate concerns that we're deliberately being distracted from, that we actually have a lot of control over. So it's about coming back into that realization, wait a minute, everything that's happening out there is showing me something amazing. It's showing me what's missing in me, which I can fix. And I show people how to do that in the book in very practical ways. The qualities that are missing within us, the healthy self-acceptance, respect, the boundaries that we need to make within ourselves and for ourselves. And these are things, all of these things are being violated by so-called authority. And these are the things we must reclaim. So we're being pushed at the deepest possible level. I mean, we're facing potentially the loss of our humanness. We look at the sort of push towards AI, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, and all of these things are coming at us, pushing us more and more to the wall to get to the point where we say, hang on a minute, we are losing our humanity. And how did we get there? So I explain in the book how we got there through all this programming, through the progressive split from who we really are to this place of outsourcing all of our faculties and progressively surrendering to the authorities that are taking control of us and taking away freedom and autonomy and other things that we actually have complete control over. That's not something anybody can grant us. Yes, that's a lot. That's a roundabout way of saying that, we have the power within us. And the power is such that we're showing ourselves on the outside what it is we need to reclaim, what it is that's missing. And so we're being pushed. It's not, we spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what's happening out there and what's true about what's out there. There's so much misinformation, malinformation, they even call it sometimes, misdirection, right? So it's very confusing. And you don't even really know what science is anymore. There's so much stuff. But again, that's a distraction from what we really need to be looking at. We need to be looking at what's happening inside us, how we've been programmed to be, to show up, to not show up, and what we can change at that level. Because when we change that, everything changes. And it is really up to us. So how we treat ourselves in everyday ways, in relationships, work, and on the road, whatever it might be, how we treat ourselves determine how we are treated by others. We set the standard. So the deeper our healthy kind of everyday self-love, not narcissism, but just healthy self-love, self-care, and self-worth, the more we attract that on the outside. Now, because we all have programming that has undermined that unconditional self-acceptance that we'd really like to have. And if we have it, we'd thrive, we'd love who we are, we'd show up, we would, in an uninhibited way, be who we are and love doing that, right? But very few of us are in that very sort of centered, calm, confident, connected place. So when we lose that, then we compromise in all kinds of ways. We try to get that acceptance on the outside. We make all kinds of compromises around boundaries, around health, around self-care. And one of the key things that we were taught as a result of this early religious indoctrination was that we're unworthy, we're sinful, and therefore, because of that, we've been turned against ourselves. And we don't love ourselves in that way either. And we often, in fact, self-harm. A lot of young people self-harm. They don't even really know why. It's just this deep, deep programming of self-rejection. And this translates into a much bigger picture where if we are not healthily accepting and loving and taking care of ourselves in the way that we are designed to, then things on the outside get screwed up. And we don't have that reflected on the outside. We're losing our grip on what it means to be human, yet we have all the power inside of us to reclaim that. And that's really what the book is designed to show people how to do. I'll take a breath there.
Okay. So I only have 14 questions that came out of that. So
Go for it.
So the fear of the wrong things, and the fear of how, or the role of how fear interferes with our self-care. A lot of people in the last 3 years have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And I totally, I'm probably talking about myself, but when this first kind of things started to hit, all my programs were triggered. And I know I'm not the only one. And then there was also this kind of giving up and resignation, particularly around self-care. When it first, not far into it, when it first happened, I went off to a secret island basically, and I was going to eat, drink, and be sherry, or drink sherry and be merry.
Yes.
And just watch the world burn kind of thing. Obviously, I was very wrong. But I realized for the first 2 years of this, I was completely operating out of triggers and fear.
Yeah.
So can you give some guidance to people who are still in that space? Because a lot of people are just waking up to what I woke up to 3 years ago, on a level that is making them just want to give up on that self-care piece. Because I think what you're saying is that's fundamental to us actually changing ourselves and the world.
Yeah. And one thing that happened with that programming is that we lost faith in ourselves. So we're programmed to defer to external authorities. And so therefore we expect them to fix things. We want them to fix things. And because we want them to fix things, we've given them huge power to actually do whatever they want, which is really tear things apart. So it means coming back to that place of understanding, if not yet totally believing, that we have that power, that the self-care and the self-love is everything. That's absolutely fundamental to what shows up in our lives. And if we neglect that, we are self-rejecting, and we're telling the authorities, this is what I think I'm worth.
Yeah.
We're not just telling the authorities, we're actually transmitting that. Our thoughts are electrical, our emotions are magnetic. We are always electromagnetically broadcasting stuff about ourselves. And we can feel that in other people too when we connect with them. So we have this power that we're largely unaware of because we are so distracted by what's going on outside, and so much of that fear distorts us and throws us off, and we're in a kind of a panic mode trying to deal with what's coming at us, having lost sight of what's in us, the power that's in us, to push back against that and to create something very different. So it really does start with basic everyday self-care, simple things. And I give a list of things that people can do to just start taking care of themselves and start to see little shifts happening in the relationships, or maybe in money flowing. It's really about honoring who we are as individuals, and understanding that we have this huge power that has been wrested from us, but only because we didn't understand that. And giving it up to the authorities and then expecting them to fix the things that they have actually made wrong is never going to work for us. We're stuck in that cycle. So, the book is very much about, and the work, it's very much about coming back to self and reclaiming what was lost and sort of taken away from us, and not allowing this fear mongering to undermine our capacities. Because, for example, we're led to believe that we can't trust our bodies anymore. We're not even talking about immune system or, our own built-in immunity as if it's suddenly old-fashioned,
Yeah.
and the idea that we need something out there to save us. And that again comes from programming. We need a savior. We need, something to save us from ourselves. But we don't need saving. We just need activating. We need to come back to ourselves, turn around and start to recognize what we're capable of, start to work with that, flex those emotional muscles that I help people to work, to get strong, and to fill in those pieces that are missing for us, emotional qualities, like acceptance, respect, encouragement, validation, all of those things that we need to be a complete and whole human being. So we see divisiveness, we see splintering, we see fragmentation happening on the outside. And you and I, we've talked about how, for example, people zoom in on one aspect of something and then they blow it up into this huge, scary thing without looking at the holistic perspective. And we've done the same has happened for us as humans. So we're, focusing on this awful virus that kill everybody or whatever it might be.
Mm.
And the truth is we have all the capacities within us to deal with that perfectly. We don't need an outside authority to tell us how to be or that we even can be. And so these are designed, everything that's happening out there, all the restrictions, the loss of freedom, all of that stuff is designed to push those buttons, not to get us to retract into fear, as so many of us have done, but to come back out and to understand, wait a minute, that's exactly what I need to build and regenerate in me, because that's missing out there and we're seeing it reflected in the collective. Yet we have power to bring ourselves back and we're being pushed to do that.
So, Olga, I want to talk a bit about religion and God, because, in the last 3 years, what I've noticed is a lot of people who did not believe in God or had some kind of fundamental training when they were young who went away from it are now coming back to it. One of the things that you said about, the programming, I remember when I was young and studied to become a missionary, it really, the religious training that I had really fed into my low self-esteem. And I remember but being conflicted because it says, like, you're a glorious child of God, but you're also calling me a good for nothing slave. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's kind of, mind messing, not the word I want to really use. So let's talk about, do you believe in God? Do you believe in a creator?
I think we need to talk about our definition of God.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's universal intelligence. It's the cosmos, it's the consciousness, universal consciousness. It's that intelligent web of which we are all a part. So it's energy. And it's something our ancestors knew how to commune with in a very real way. They understood cosmology, sacred geometry, all of this stuff. So when I talk about God, in fact, I talk in the book about godness, our goodness and our godness. And I'm not talking about us deifying humans. I'm talking about us being part of this seamless energy field, the field that is made up of conscious and universal intelligence, of which we are all a part. And we're all interacting with it. We're all having an impact on it, and we can draw from it. So that's my understanding of God and my interpretation of it. And yes, of course, I believe in that. It's all around us. We're made of it. God doesn't screech to a halt right here. It's seamless. We're all part of it. We're all interconnected through that. So that's my belief, and that's my understanding of what that means.
Well, let's talk a little bit about religious programming, because although we have slightly different, views on that piece, I think we're probably very much in sync about the damage from religious programming that's actually happened and how it's contributed us to being in this situation. Can you expand a little bit more on that, on your beliefs around how religious programming has led us to be in this situation today?
Yeah. Well, as I said, there were some core things that happened way back. We're talking about the early 300s,
Mm,
talking about our pagan ancestors, who've been given, who really have undergone a smear campaign in the same way that happening now in our world with anybody trying to expose the truth. But our pagan ancestors were very earthy, egalitarian, wise, nature-based people. And so they didn't need anybody to tell them how to be. They didn't need anybody telling them how to run their lives. They had their own connection. Pagan gods have also been sort of vilified, but they had their own spiritual autonomy, especially the more intellectual classes were experts in metaphysics and all of this other stuff, communing with nature, as I said, and the living cosmos. So along came religion. Along came um, the ruling elite at the time, Emperor Constantine, the Roman Emperor, 300s, decided that the people were just too unruly and wanted to take control of the people, wanted to have more power of the people, and brought in Christianity as the ruling religion. You have to submit. And we've heard stories about this, but don't really get the enormity of what happened back then, how our ancestors were forced to submit. They were burnt at the stake. They were persecuted. They were turned against each other. They were terrified. And young children watched their parents burn at the stake. There was all kinds of horrendous stuff that happened. And in that process of indoctrination, as I said, we were taught that we were sinful, unworthy, which led to shame, guilt, all kinds of self-rejection, self-destructive behaviors, which explains why now we're destroying our planet because it's an extension of our own bodies. And, the loss of spiritual autonomy that our ancestors also have, that was torn from them, stripped from them. They were forced to defer to this external God, just as now we are kind of programmed to defer to external authority and to fear authority. We have a deep primal fear of authority, and we can see where it comes from if we go back and look. And there's nobody alive today, obviously, has a living memory of that. It's in our genes, it's in our, primally imprinted in us, but don't know that. We don't know the source of it. So all of this stuff happened that resulted in what I call the split, where we more and more as time went on and programming continued down the generations from that original split. That's when we lost our connection more and more with nature, and we became more and more denatured, and ourselves became less and less human, if you like, or less and less connected to nature. Very few people nowadays, especially urban dwellers, really connect with nature. They perhaps wouldn't care that there are thousands of birds dying or species of animals, and wildlife dying all around them while they're kind of glued to their phone. So, we've lost that. We've lost that respect and reverence for nature and the connection with it that actually enabled us to heal. So our self-healing capacities, our self-mastery, our autonomy, all of those things, religion stripped away and caused us to outsource ourselves, our souls even, if you like, to this higher authority. So even if we're not religious now, we still have that programming. It permeates the human psyche and has really distorted it, resulting in what I call the psychocide. We'll
And,
talk about it.
and we see that, our media, and governments are really working off of that, and with the mind control, programming on television and, the news, that kind of thing. They're using similar tactics that religion used back in those
Yes.
days.
Definitely, and leveraging it, leveraging the fear that's in us, the primal fear, the loss of faith in self. It's very easy to leverage that stuff to keep people in a state of fear.
You,
Yeah.
you talked about this split that happens, and if you look at the work from MK Ultra, and mind control programs, they work to traumatize, to create a split within humans, and it makes people more easily controlled. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how how for those of us who have actually experienced that level of trauma, how do we start to etch back our power to, you know, how do we start the reversal, the psychocide reversal?
Yes. How do we heal all those wounds that we carry around that were not even originally ours? Yes, it's a very tough road to take. And it starts with very small steps. The self-care we talked about, the self-love, practical ways in which we can start to say yes to ourselves and no to things we don't really want to be doing. And trusting that when we do that, because of the power of our subconscious mind, because of the power of our magnetism from our thoughts and our emotions, we attract something different when we make that shift in our favor. Now, okay, that's not going to begin to touch our trauma, because if we have post-traumatic stress disorder, which many, many people have now, it's kind of almost a global condition.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be very gentle with that. We need, not just gentle hand holding, but also heart holding, I call it. And we need each other for
Mm.
that. That is where community and coming together is so important, where family is so important. And again, as you were saying, it's one of the classic ways of disempowering people, or let's say weakening people, by dividing them. So there's power in the tribe, which is why
Yeah.
we were put into isolation before with masking and all of this stuff.
Yes.
There's huge power in the tribe. We need that. We
Yeah.
need that for healing. We need to practice it. We need it to practice loving ourselves, how we show up with another in loving ourselves, because we really can't love another unless we embody love ourselves first. So we start with those small steps, and the book takes you through that. And then we get back into nature. Um, there's a big section at the end of the book, towards the end of the book, where I talk about reconnecting with planet, with Gaia, with Mother Earth, and how that nurtures us and how it can heal us. And it's something we're also missing as a result of this progressive split. So we really need nature. Nature is not just where we happen to survive biologically and physically. It's something we absolutely need. And to treat it as anything less than our essence really is to misunderstand completely what it represents. So nature is one of our healing pathways. It's the fundamental healing pathway. So we need each other. We need to get back to to our human nature, understanding the nature of reality, and then the power of nature itself. Those three things are kind of key, and they go together, and they're being split apart as well
Mm.
at the same time. So there are many different things that we'd have to do individually to heal trauma. I touch on some of them in the book, but it's a very personal journey that does require first that we come back to self, and we recognize that we have been wounded, and separated from what it is that heals us, and disconnected from, universal thing, as well as nature healing and all the other things out there that would bring us comfort and solace and kind of relief and reconnection, but mostly reconnecting with others and sharing our story. So when we share our pain lives right beside love in the heart. They go together. And if we have too much pain, the love gets kind of hidden and buried. So when we when we try to get to the love, we have to meet the pain. So we want to work with the pain, work through the pain to get to the love that's buried underneath. That's the part that's worth digging for. So we've got to go down through the layers of maybe anger, resentment, defensiveness, whatever it might be, pain, to get to the love that's underneath, that drives it all, right? And we've had so many layers put on top of it that it's not always readily accessible. And perhaps we never learned what love is anyway. We grew up with the kind of negative programming that most of us got, right? So lots of different elements, but definitely sharing our story and coming from our hearts, getting back into our hearts, because I know this from my own experience that when we're in fear, defensiveness, or retraction because of fear, our hearts can go offline. And it's very hard to stay in there to know that they have power. They have their own intelligence. Our hearts have their own neuron. They actually have their own brain. So there's huge wisdom and intuition in there. And that can get shut down and switched off. And we can go up into our heads and get into all kinds of strategies, defensive measures, coping mechanisms, all the things we actually learned in order to survive because of the programming. But that's not being deeply human. That's not us being connected to our hearts and living from that place and loving life, because we're so extraordinary that we're in awe of nature and what we are able to do within nature and within ourselves.
Usually when I do interviews, I have tons of questions. The questions come fairly easily. But when I'm talking to you, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant in a very gentle way. You know what I mean? Like I'm really kind of so like to unpack what you just said, we could do 10 hours of interviewing, really, just with what you just said. But the question that did come up for me was, of all the chapters in this book, what was the hardest chapter to write? And why? Or did it all just flow? It may have all just flowed.
Wow. I'm just looking at it here, trying to, refresh my memory, because it's a bit of a monster. It's nearly 600 pages.
What? Hold it up and just show the thickness to just...
Well, I've got my little bookmark.
Yeah.
It's quite thick.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Awesome.
Well, you said at the beginning that you really want to focus now on solutions, and that was my impetus as well, and always is. To get there, sometimes we have to go along a sort of a potholed path that's not so nice, and it's pretty dirty and scruffy and painful, and we get scratched and damaged along the way. So it's not always easy to get to that place of solutions, because we have to wade through what's in the way of it. Ultimately, we want to upgrade, we want to get to that place of reconnecting with our humanness, but to get there, we have to go through what's in the way of that. And that's why challenges, sorry, I'm going off track a little bit here, but that's why challenges can sometimes be so difficult, because it looks like life's just happening to us and it's just never-endingly difficult. But the challenges are very specifically tailored to us, trigger our issues, to make clear to us what our particular missing pieces are. And that filling those in then makes us the complete human that we're meant to be. That then upgrades us. So we go, it's not that we hit a wall, we hit a new ceiling. And we want to be edging out of our comfort zone progressively back up to that place, or to that place of fulfillment and expression of who we really are, reaching that higher potential, tapping into our higher capacities. So to answer your question, I'm not sure what was most difficult about them, but it's tough talking about the bad stuff. And I kept trying to think of ways to take out the preamble, the context, setting the context. I talk a lot about wireless radiation in there, for example, which is something many people do not want to look at, don't think it's an issue. They really don't want to know. Can we just get on with living, please? What is your problem? I love my phone. Everything works. It keeps me safe. It keeps me connected. Yeah, it gave me a brain tumor. So, we have this in life. We are, on the one hand, striving to be the best that we can be, despite our programming, with our programming working against us like a drag, if you like. And we're trying to get to that place of fulfillment. But at the same time, we are doing things to ourselves that undermine that journey. They undermine our capacity to upgrade and to really have a life that we love. And irradiating ourselves is one of those things. So remember, I talked earlier about the way we treat ourselves determines how we're treated. That's a fundamental kind of law, universal law.
Mm.
So if we are harming ourselves, even if we don't realize that we are, or harming nature as we are with all this radiation bombarding us from space as well, and wildlife, birds dying in the thousands, species dying, it's really pervasive now. So it also represents what's happening with us, because radiation knows no boundaries. It's pervasive, it's invasive, it's in your face, it's all around you. You can't control it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. It's like our electromagnetic field has all those same qualities, apart from being invasive. But, it's all energy. And we, in our essence, are meant to radiate out. But instead, we are irradiating ourselves with something that's very harmful, self-destructive, destroying the planet progressively, not recognizing perhaps that we are. So these are some of the things that I've touched on that I know people don't want to explore. Yet it's a huge springboard to greatness, because the phones, cell phones, apart from being irradiating devices that are carcinogenic, that are microwaves coming at us in very strong ways, and producing all kinds of conditions that aren't linked back to the source, aren't understood or attributed, being caused by that. There's still, this radiation is still affecting the resonance of the planet, Schumann resonance, as I said, wildlife, crops, babies, fertility in young people, maybe even the next generation won't be able to conceive properly, DNA being damaged, all kinds of stuff happening. So there is this invisible force that we are kind of turning on ourselves without realizing that, because we see only the benefit. Think of it as being safe and important and essential. In fact, that we have a right, we're entitled to have a phone, but dare try and take it away from me because it's the only thing I can actually depend on, right? So all of that in the mix. And that's a very tough, contentious area to address and to try to take people lovingly through it. And I think I found that the most challenging section. I feel it's one of the most important, because on the other side of that addiction or dependence, and I know it's intentionally created, of course, on the other side of that is the power of us trying to get out. And it's almost as if the phone is power by proxy. Our phones do a lot of the things that we ourselves and that our ancestors, were capable of doing. Telepathy, I've experienced it. I've lived it. It's quite extraordinary. When we get into that mode, it's very easy to then get out of it again, and be pulled out of it by whatever, swirling around us, the madness out there. So, yes, that's a very tough piece to contend with. Those of us who have willing to give it up and try to live a simpler life, which I have been forced because of, being so severely affected by electromagnetic radiation, man-made radiation. I haven't had that option. I haven't been able to sort of make an intellectual choice about having a cell phone. I gave it up 10 years ago when I got a tumor. And I had to revert to a much simpler, more nature-based life. Mm-hmm. And that has brought me back. So there have been huge benefits, huge losses too. I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost, the capacity to socialize in the same way. But it has brought me back to me. And I've reconnected with parts of me that I certainly had lost the edge on, I think, and the deeper connection with. I never really got into cell phones a lot. I had one, but never went down that road because that option was removed for me. So, yes, it's very contentious. This issue is very, very contentious for people to consider. But one thing also to bear in mind is that it is, the whole cellular network and the whole wireless grid is part of this kind of planned takeover, this tech takeover that we're undergoing. And it's funny because I always make the connection between the first takeover, which happened, way back in the early 300s, when everything about our ancestors was kind of taken from them, the essence of their humanness and that connection with nature, all of that stuff. And that set the scene for this second takeover, because what we're facing now is an inanimate takeover. The takeover by a technology that's inanimate. It has no soul. And that's what was wrested from our ancestors back then. They had soul, were very deeply connected to soul and to the planet itself. So we can see that progression if we go to look, if we want to look, we're motivated to look, and most people aren't.
Mm.
They don't want to go there. They
Yeah.
don't want the inconvenience. They don't want to have to give it up. Their phone is their lifeline, and don't you dare try to take it away from me. So very tough, because what we're really doing in ignoring that is progressively taking ourselves down that path, not just of the inanimate takeover, but the progressive denaturing of our planet and therefore destruction of our planet. And there isn't another one. We don't have a backup. So part of the book is about putting planet first, coming back to, in fact, really, if you look at politics, which really doesn't have any meaning anymore, and climate change or climatologists or environmentalists or conservation, it really doesn't mean anything. There is one key criterion to bear in mind that really is the only thing that matters. And it's kind of based on the question, is this good for the planet? Not just can the planet tolerate this, but is this good for the planet? So one of the pivotal pieces of rebooting the species is getting to that place, getting back to that place where our ancestors were, of reverence for and connection to the planet, the living planet, Mother Earth, Gaia, whatever we want to call it. And that's something that is there in front of us, a big sort of no-go zone for so many people, or just something they don't even see, but is really crucial for us moving forward.
Well, I see so many similarities between the not wanting to give up the phones and not wanting to give up the foods that are actually harming us.
Yeah.
It's like I'm traumatized. I just want to, have this thing that's easy, that comforts me, I can hide out in, right? No one gorges themselves in public the way they do in private. It's like, and no one would, there's a lot of connection between things that we would, in, engorge ourselves on our phones, we, wouldn't do in public, and how it's actually separating us. Can you give some guidance and direction in the book, where to look for in the book, to how to wean ourselves off of these things? And I'd love to I'd love for you to share some of the insights that happened for you. You had a big wake up call. Not all of us get a brain tumor to kind of go, yeah, this is definitely not a good thing. But
Yeah.
can you tell us about the process that it took for you? Um, and some of the pitfalls you had, but how you overcame those pitfalls of disconnecting from
Mm. Yes.
the grid.
Yes, it's interesting because, programming does kick in when something like this happens. You first of all get angry with everybody else, but then you also turn your anger on yourself. You think, well, everybody else can handle it. Why can't I handle it? And what's wrong with me that I can't deal with this stuff? Everybody else is loving their lives and loving their technology and all of that stuff. So that kicks in, and that's a tough one. And it brings us back to the self-love. Am I going to reject myself in this process of having harmed my own body with this technology that is never designed? It was never a loving technology to start with. It wasn't intended to serve and elevate and honor humanity. It's
Mm,
never been about that, right? And we know a lot more now about what it is actually designed to do and how it changes our cognitive function, or spirituality, even our empathy, or capacity to care. So all of that, came at me. And in fact, I write about it in the EMF Off with a lot of humor because I needed that. And it was when I actually wrote two of my other books that are very, dare I say it, funny. Funny for me, I'm Irish and I have my own sense of humor, but
love your
I
humor.
needed that. I needed that. Thank you, Sherry. I really needed the humor. And I talk in this book too, in Psychocide Reversal, about the power of humor to enlighten us. And if I hadn't had my humor, and if I hadn't gone into it with those books, you know, I wrote one book called Talk on the Wild Side, where I did all kinds of interviews with inanimate objects. You know, I interviewed a toilet, and I interviewed a hyena, and you know, other animals, and a parking meter that swallowed my money. You know, I had all, and even T-Rex, you know, the fossil. It's hilarious. I read it again every so often to bring me back to humor, because it's such a wonderful, unique human quality that only humans have. Although Larry, what's his name, Gary Larson might disagree on that one. But we really need that. So that was one key thing that I drew from that really helped me to come back out and to keep that, my humanity, such as it is, you know, because it's tough to hold on to that when all of this stuff is, the world is shrinking because of, you know, things you cannot be around anymore and friendships you can't sustain anymore and all of that. So, yes, I was challenged on all of those levels and deeply as a person, and challenged also to find my own strength of character, get through that, and to still like myself or love myself and take care of myself in all of that. So yes, humor was a big piece. Nature was another piece. And when we came to live here in rural France, we live in a, you know, an old stone farmhouse, and we've got the woods just down the road. And I walk there every day. And in the summer, it's extraordinary. I stop and I just listen to the bird song, and it's exquisite. I think, you know, people in the city, first of all, probably don't hear it. And if it's not there, don't miss it. I don't know that it's missing or that it ever was there before. And so reconnecting with that, and then out of that, which is again the kind of the natural progression, that when we do connect deeply with nature and when we more deeply connect with ourselves, we ideally learn how to meditate, how to connect at that higher level, how to connect with universal intelligence. And I know from my own experience that most of my books have come through me. You know, I'm just kind of the willing scribe trying to keep up as it comes down through me and is given to me. And I'm sure a lot of writers find that, and I'm sure you do too. So I know we have this huge, big web, our own web, energy web, and web of intelligence that's so much more transformative and rewarding and enlightening and uplifting than the internet, you know, this other web. And while we're caught up in that one, as much as we are caught up in that one, we perhaps fail to connect with the other one. And that is where we have the opportunity now to get back to an understanding of our capacity to co-create with our living cosmos, and to understand how we can tap into that living intelligence, the consciousness that's all around us, to create the life that we want to have. And one of the things that's really key, coming back to your question about how I dealt with this, was to hold a vision of the world that I want, and the me that I want, the me that I want to be in that world. And so few of us now, because of that fear we talked about, you know, and retracting and comfort food eating, and all that stuff, you know, all the reactions we have, rather than being proactively seeking and working to create the positive, healthy world that we want. Because some of us, most of us, don't believe it exists. And because we have no faith in ourselves, we can't see how to get there. And yet we do succumb thinking, well, it's just bigger than me. It's big, it's just huge. Look at what's happening in the world. Look at the forces around us. And what difference does it make if I do this one thing? Right. So holding a vision, creating a vision, and what I call pre-living and pre-loving that vision. Because we know from many sort of human potential thinkers, Joe Dispenza and others, and Bruce Lipton, many others who have talked about this, that there is huge power in pre-living and pre-imagining and having the emotions that go with being in that future reality. So it's one of the pieces of this journey that I cover in the book. One of those pieces is having that vision of our ideal reality and feeding in it and being in it, even if you only sort of spend 20 minutes a day there, putting yourself in it and feeling what that feels like and letting yourself feel excited and having some elevated emotion. Because our elevated emotions, those higher frequency emotions, have much more impact. And we want to be sort of vibrating or emoting at that level to create or to attract more of the same. If we're stuck in fear, we're stuck in negativity and reactivity, we're going to get more of that. That's how powerful we are.
Mm.
And we don't know that that's how powerful we are. So it's really important to tell ourselves daily, I am too powerful to indulge in that.
Mm.
You know, that's an indulgence I can't afford to engage in because I'm so powerful, right? And we all have the capacity to feed a vision and to realize, to make real a vision of that life we want. But we have to start here with holding the vision, deciding what it is that we'd like to have, not getting too specific, but getting the feelings of it. Like I want to feel centered and calm and loved and loving and enjoying life and creative and be deeply fulfilled and heartfelt and excited. All of those things are very elevated emotions. When we're stuck in fear, it's a much lower vibration. We're going to attract more of whatever it is we're in most of the time. That's another universal law. You know, we're going to attract more of what we're transmitting. We'll be very careful, very mindful of what we're transmitting into the world, what we're telling ourselves. Another thing I talk about in the book is, well, to think about what's your story? What's your story about yourself? Are you always telling yourself you're amazing? You know, that you can do this, you've got this covered, let's do this. This is just another challenge designed to take me to a higher place. Or do we say, oh, get it, it's never going to work. Think you are, you know, it didn't work last time. And so we can keep ourselves stuck. We become our own negative programmers. Once we've been programmed, we don't see what's happened and we don't go back in to decide if those beliefs that have been imprinted in us actually serve us or not. They're going to run us. Just by default, they'll keep running us. And the power of us felt in us attracting confirmation of those. So we think life is difficult. It shows up. It's difficult. See, told you it was difficult, right? We do this all the time. We're always building a case against ourselves because we want proof of what we believe. But the thing is, we can change our beliefs. That changes what we attract. And then we get different validation and confirmation of those higher, more truthful beliefs about ourselves.
So I'm having a visualization while you're speaking about, you know, the frequency chart that's like the spiral going up and the spiral going down.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, going down a hill is easier. You know, it's more dangerous, right? But it's easier than walking up the hill. Those choices that you're talking about, they do require more from us to, you know, to do it. And we get greater reward, whereas the choices that require less from us are easier, more seductive, more addictive. We get more pain, you know, or it contributes to our enslavement. What's kind of a, you know, something that you teach around? I used to say making strong choices for a strong life, making hard, you know, choices for an easy life, kind of thing. What are some coaching tips that you would give to our parents out, you know, out there who are experiencing this incredible pull downward for themselves and their children in schools, you know, and with the medical system? What advice would you give them?
One of the key things is to not descend down into fear and teach that to your child. They're going to learn it anyway. There's plenty of it out there. But if you can stand for, if you can try to embrace and embody and demonstrate to the child this deeper ownership of self, like the separation from all the fear mongering, all the reactivity, all the defensiveness, all the stuff that's happening out there. That's the biggest gift you can give your child, any child, is to fill in your own missing pieces and try to be that whole, rounded, self-loving, self-caring human. That is the biggest gift. There is no other gift in a way that you can give them that's greater than that, because we're teaching them that all the time. Our missing pieces, as I call them, get handed down from generation to generation. Unless we fill them in, make ourselves more whole, bring ourselves back to being the whole, complete, self-loving, fulfilled, creative, activated human that we are designed to be. Unless we do that, we're just passing on all our fears. So all the stuff that's happening out there that's triggering parents in these ways is designed to take them back to those missing qualities that they need to start cultivating. And we can only build what I call emotional muscle when there's resistance. And the resistance comes in the shape of challenges or suppression or oppression or whatever it might be that's coming at us, that's causing us to react, fearfully and fear for our lives, our health, our children, our autonomy, our freedoms, our control over anything. So the only way that I know of to get through that is to work with those missing pieces. It sounds terribly simple. It sounds as if, well, hey, I take better care of myself. How's that going to help with what's happening to my child at school? Well, you teach them through demonstrating how to be a strong, self-sufficient, empowered human being. And that's really our job as parents and as caregivers, to do that, because anything less than that dishonors the child and teaches them the opposite. And if we are filled with fear ourselves and we're behaving in that way and reacting in that way to that stuff, that's what we teach them. And then we can't be there to protect them all the time. But if we build those qualities in them, they become their own self-sufficient human, got their own autonomy or their own reserves or their own capacities for dealing with things, but also creating a reality that is much healthier, more positive and rewarding. Tough one. It's very tough because parents, obviously you've got tremendous worry and concern and maybe even terror for children. And it's a very tough ground to stand in when you are triggered, to know that it's about working on yourself. That, okay, yes, of course you want to help your child. You do anything to help your child. Sacrifice your whole self to help your child. But that's not what serves the child. So we self-sacrifice a lot, in lots of different ways. And that's part of the cycle that we need to break, that we're being pushed to break.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm really, really passionate about, myself and parents understanding, is, this versus child, and how, we're constantly communicating to a child what's more important or what's most important. And it's become the addictive thing. It's in many ways it's worse than the household I grew up in, where the cigarette was, we couldn't afford butter, we had the powdered milk, but there was always money for cigarettes and alcohol, right? And so it's another addiction that kind of children are secondary to, and constantly reminded that they're not, their insignificance, I think, in some respects. And I don't think parents really understand just how powerful that communication is. Oh.
Yeah, I think it's a primal disconnect, and it's kind of parenting by proxy almost, but it's also power by proxy. It's kind of surrendering that connection that should be through hugs or talking or eye contact or emotional support or, whatever it might be that a child actually needs physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. They don't get that from a phone, and the phone further disconnects them from themselves, from their parents, and becomes like a lifeline, but it's a lifeline that they're grasping onto, let's say, in the middle of a kind of a shipwreck. You know what I mean? They're not using the phone in the context of a loving, supportive, balanced, connected environment, because the phone itself destroys that. You
Mm,
can't have both, really. I mean, yes, you could put it in its place and have minimal use of it, but it's still, the nature of it is separation and a kind of um, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of it is proxy. You know, you're pushing it off, handing off whatever part of the parenting um, or support that child needs. You're giving it to an inanimate object, and that then takes over and becomes something that the child relies on more than anything else. Becomes dependent on it, becomes addicted to it, becomes shaped by it, and very much diminished by it. Know how much it affects the brain and how much it creates all kinds of cognitive dissonance and other loss of other qualities, as I said, empathy, caring, love, deeply feeling things and being connected to them. So it's not a gift. Giving a child a mobile phone, cell phone, is the very opposite of a gift.
mm, I believe that. So, speaking of gifts, you have just given birth, I believe, to a great gift um, for humanity. How do people actually get Psychocide Reversal? How do we actually find your book?
Well, if you go to my website, which is olgasheean.com,
And we'll
and you
list it.
click on books, yeah, you'll see it there. In fact, all the books are there, and then you can order it. You can get it as an ebook, not something I like to do, obviously, for obvious reasons, but of course you can get the big tome itself. And I think it's something that takes people a while to work through. I don't expect people to read through this quickly. This is not something, you take to the beach and read when you're on holiday. It does require work. So yes, they can go to the website, they can get it there, they can get it on Amazon, probably one of the primary places for us to buy books, unfortunately. But also using it as a system to get out of it, in a sense. So Amazon is a great platform, but you can also use it to take yourself to a better, higher place. So I don't want to make it all bad. And then from there, to start a conversation, I would encourage people to try and create a community around ownership of self, returning to full ownership of self, which is what the book is designed to help you do. Maybe have a book club, maybe get a group together around it and do the homework together, because the homework is challenging. Do our homework with other people. We don't do it sitting at home looking at our navel. We have to interact, we have to be triggered, and then we are able to do the homework when we're triggered. That's our point of power. Sorry, it's a roundabout, longer response to your question.
No,
But
it's a great response. And when you were talking, I'd actually thought this is a perfect book for a book club, and then you'd mentioned it, and I was
yeah,
like,
I
so
think
yeah,
it would be, because we need that support, and it's part of what's missing.
yeah,
So coming back to a place of, the book being the center, like allowing it to cultivate wholeness, coming back to that wholeness, that cohesion, that coherence, rather than the divisive entering the fragmentation that's been happening to us, done to us. Only we can bring ourselves back. We need to pull ourselves together, but we also need to reunite with others and create community to give us that missing piece.
So if you had the world's attention for 3 minutes, and you had 3 minutes to communicate something right now, apart from buy Psychocide Reversal to get that book and start the book club, what would be your most salient message for humanity right now?
I would say that we have capacities that we're unaware of, that we have tremendous faculties within us that can take us to extraordinary places that are far more exciting and far more rewarding and life enhancing than anything that's coming at us in the world of artificial intelligence. And that we need each other, and that coming back together is the most potent thing that we can do to bring our world to a place of harmony, to understand the true nature of conflict and to come back into harmony within ourselves so that we create that on the outside. Because really, we're designed to be together, to work together, and to be in harmony and to elevate ourselves and really thrive. Some of us are just about surviving, hanging in there. This is about thriving. This is what we're being pushed to do now, and I think it's time.
I think that's a perfect conclusion to our interview. I know I could ask you hundreds of more questions, and in our own private chats, get ready for it. um,
Happy to.
For those of you who don't have direct access to Olga like I do, even though she does do coaching, so you can check that out. She has coaching on her website. I strongly encourage you to grab this book, read it, grab a study group to go through it, and to definitely connect with other people. It's a sacred lifeline for us. So thank you so much, Olga, for writing another fantastic book, for taking the time with us today. And I will put tons of information in the description below so people can connect with you and get your book. But thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay.